Danny Ross stood knee-deep in trash, wiping sweat from his forehead as the twin sons of Castellum 9 beat down on the junkyard. This place was a graveyard for things nobody wanted to remember. Broken starships, busted mechs, and enough scrap metal to build a small moon. Most people avoided the deeper sections where the war machines rotted, but Danny? He made his living pulling treasure from other people's garbage. His boots crunched over shattered hull plating as he climbed another hill of debris. Something had pinged on his scanner about 20 minutes ago, buried deep under layers of military wreckage. Probably nothing, but Danny had learned to trust his instincts. The good salvage was always hidden where nobody else wanted to look. He spotted it wedged between two collapsed drop ships. At first he thought it was just another piece of destroyed armor, but then he saw the faint blue glow pulsing from inside the wreckage. Danny's breath caught. That glow meant active power cells. After 7 years in this junkyard, something down there was still alive. It took him an hour to clear enough debris to see what he'd found. When he finally pulled away the last sheet of twisted metal, Danny just stared. It was a cyborg but not human. The design was elegant and deadly, with sleek chitinous plating that shimmered even under layers of grime. Valkyrie. One of their elite soldiers from the border wars. Most of her body was gone. Her legs were missing below the knees. One arm had been torn off at the shoulder. Her torso was cracked, exposing broken crystalline circuits that still hummed with faint energy. By all rights, she should have been completely dead. But that blue pulse kept flickering in her core processor, stubborn and refusing to quit. Danny pulled out his portable scanner and ran diagnostics. Her main cognitive systems were intact, just dormant. Whoever had dumped her here had removed the obvious valuable parts but left her core behind, probably thinking it was too damaged to salvage. They were wrong. His communicator crackled. "Danny, you find anything worth dragging back?" It was his business partner calling from the shop. "Yeah," Danny said slowly, still staring at the broken cyborg. "You're not gonna believe this one. Try me. I've seen everything in 15 years of running this place. I found a Valkyrie enforcer. Still got active power signatures." The line went silent for a long moment. "You're joking." "Nope. She's torn up bad, but her core's still running." "Leave it, Danny. Those things killed thousands of our people during the war. Let it rust." Danny looked at the cyborg's faceplate. Even damaged, he could see the craftsmanship. The Empire built their soldiers to be perfect killing machines, but they also made them beautiful in a strange, terrifying way. "I'm bringing her in. That's suicide. If she wakes up, she'll tear you apart. Then I won't wake her up until I'm ready." Danny disconnected before his partner could argue more. He spent the next 2 hours rigging a harness to drag the cyborg back to his workshop. She was heavier than she looked, even with most of her body missing. Valkyrie alloys were dense as hell. By the time he got her loaded onto his salvage trailer, his arms were shaking and his back screamed in protest. The workshop was a converted cargo hauler that Danny had turned into his personal space over the years. Tools covered every surface. Half-finished projects hung from the ceiling. It smelled like oil welding fumes and the cheap coffee he lived on. He cleared his main workbench and carefully positioned the cyborg under his overhead lights. Up close, the damage was even worse than he'd thought. Her memory cores were fractured. Her neural pathways had been severed in a dozen places. Whoever had deactivated her hadn't been gentle about it. Danny pulled up a chair and just looked at her for a while. He'd rebuilt plenty of machines in his career. Military drones, civilian mechs, even a few simple AI units. But this was different. This was a person, or had been once. The Valkyrie didn't draw clear lines between organic and synthetic. Their enforcers were born as living beings and then enhanced with technology until the distinction stopped mattering. "What happened to you?" he muttered, running his fingers over the imperial markings on her chassis. Elite unit designation. Combat honors. And something else, a notation he didn't recognize. It looked like a decommission code, the kind used for defective equipment. They'd thrown her away like a broken tool. Danny made his decision then. He'd spent 3 years in the war as a combat engineer, watching command treat soldiers like ammunition to be expended. He'd seen good people abandoned when they stopped being useful. If he could give this Valkyrie warrior a second chance, maybe it would balance out some of the waste and cruelty he'd witnessed. He fired up his fabrication systems and got to work. The first challenge was figuring out how to interface human components with Valkyrie biology. Their technology was more advanced, but it was also rigid and specialized. Human military gear was cruder but adaptable. Danny started printing replacement limbs based on standard prosthetic designs, then modified them to match her alien physiology. 3 weeks blurred together. Danny barely slept, surviving on coffee and the occasional protein bar. He fabricated new legs, building them sturdy enough to handle her weight and power requirements. The arm was harder because it needed fine motor control. He went through 4 prototypes before he got one that would integrate properly with her neural interface. The memory cores were delicate work. One wrong move and he could erase whatever was left of her personality. Danny worked slowly, carefully bridging broken connections and routing damaged pathways through backup systems. It was like surgery and programming combined into one impossible task. On day 23 he finished the final connection. Her new limbs were attached. Her memory cores were as repaired as he could manage. Her power cells were fully charged. Danny stood back, exhausted and covered in grease, and pressed the activation switch. For a long moment nothing happened. Then her chest plate began to glow brighter. Systems hummed to life throughout her body. Her new fingers twitched. And finally her optical sensors flickered on, burning with pale blue light. She turned her head slowly, looking around the workshop like someone waking from a nightmare. Her gaze settled on Danny, and he suddenly felt very aware that he was standing 3 feet away from a trained killer. Her voice came out rough and distorted, like she'd forgotten how to speak. Why? Just that one word, but it carried the weight of 1,000 questions. Danny grabbed a stool and sat down slowly, keeping his movements calm and non-threatening. The cyborg's optical sensors tracked him with unsettling precision, processing every micro-movement he made. He could practically hear the combat algorithms running in her head, calculating threat levels and attack vectors. "You asked why," Danny said, keeping his voice steady. "Why did I fix you?" She nodded once, the motion stiff and uncertain. Her new human-made limbs didn't move quite like her original Valkyrie body parts would have. There was a slight delay, a mechanical quality that hadn't been there before. "Because nobody else would," Danny said simply. "I found you in the junkyard, still alive after 7 years. Seemed wrong to leave you there." The cyborg was silent for a long moment, her processors working through this information. Finally she spoke again, her voice slightly clearer this time. "Designation Searlaw. Enforcer Unit 729. She paused, her head tilting in confusion. "I cannot access primary memory banks. Systems are fragmented." Danny pulled up a diagnostic screen on his workbench monitor. "Yeah, your memory cores were pretty badly damaged. I repaired what I could, but there are gaps. Big ones. What do you remember?" Searlaw's optical sensors dimmed as she searched through her broken databanks. "Combat protocols. Weapon systems. Target acquisition subroutines. I remember battles. Many battles." Her voice grew quieter. "I remember humans screaming." Danny felt a chill run down his spine but forced himself to stay calm. "The war ended 7 years ago. Humans and Valkyrie signed a peace treaty. We're not fighting anymore." 7 years? Searlaw looked down at her hands, flexing the fingers of her new prosthetic arm. "These components are human military grade. You integrated them into my frame." "Had to. Your original parts were gone. I used what I had available." Danny stood and walked to a small refrigerator unit, pulling out a bottle of water. His hands were shaking slightly and he needed something to do with them. The Empire decommissioned thousands of soldiers after the war. Dumped them in junkyards across the sector. You were one of them. Decommissioned. Searlaw repeated the word like it tasted bitter. "I was property. A tool that outlived its usefulness." "Seems that way." Danny took a long drink of water. "The markings on your chassis show you were elite. Top-tier combat unit. But there's also a defect code. The kind they use for equipment that doesn't perform to specifications." Searlaw went very still. Deep in her fragmented memory banks, something was stirring. Images flickered across her consciousness, partial and corrupted but still there. A mission. Her squad standing in formation. Orders coming through that made no sense. Unarmed humans kneeling in a row. Her commander's voice demanding compliance. "I remember refusing," she said suddenly. "Orders came to execute prisoners. Colonists who had surrendered. My squad questioned the command. We argued it violated engagement protocols." Danny set down his water bottle. "What happened then?" "Static. Corruption in the memory file." Searlaw's voice carried frustration. "The next clear memory is deactivation. My own command structure shut me down. Then nothing until you activated me in this workshop." The pieces were falling into place. Danny had heard rumors during the war about Valkyrie units that asked too many questions. The Empire valued obedience above all else. Soldiers who developed independent thinking were considered compromised, defective. They got quietly disposed of where no one would find them. They threw you away for having a conscience, Danny said quietly. Over the following days, Danny continued working on Sirla's systems while she adapted to her new hybrid body. He'd rebuilt her legs slightly longer than Valkyrie standard because human components came in different proportions. She had to relearn how to walk, her combat programming struggling to adjust to the altered biomechanics. Danny watched her practice movement drills in the workshop, stumbling at first but quickly adapting. The Valkyrie were masters of efficiency, and even with damaged memories, Sirla's core programming helped her adjust. Within 3 days she was moving smoothly, though her gait was subtly different from standard enforcer patterns. "Your engineering is crude," Sirla observed one evening, examining her prosthetic arm under a work light. "But functional. The human approach to technology is less elegant than Valkyrie design." Danny looked up from the diagnostic panel he was reviewing. "Less elegant maybe. But we make things that work with what we've got. Valkyrie tech is amazing until it breaks. Then it's useless. Human gear is tougher, easier to repair, more adaptable." Sirla rotated her wrist, testing the joint. "Adaptability. Yes. I am beginning to understand this concept. My original frame was optimized for specific combat scenarios. This hybrid body is less specialized but more versatile." "Exactly." Danny grinned. "Welcome to the human way of doing things. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're really good at making do with whatever's available." As Sirla recovered more memory fragments, Danny learned about her past. She'd served for 8 years before the incident that got her decommissioned. She'd completed 73 missions across a dozen worlds. Her combat record was flawless until the day she questioned orders. "My entire squad refused," Sirla explained. 5 enforcers. We had seen too much unnecessary killing. The war was ending. The humans were ready to surrender. Executing prisoners served no tactical purpose. "What happened to the others in your squad?" "I do not know. My memory of that time is corrupted. But I suspect they met the same fate as me. Deactivated. Discarded. Erased from Imperial records." Danny felt a connection forming between them that surprised him. He'd spent 3 years as a combat engineer during the war, keeping mechs and vehicles running under fire. He'd watched his commanding officers make decisions that got good people killed for no reason. When the retreat came, his entire unit was abandoned behind enemy lines. He'd survived by stealing parts from damaged mechs and trading repairs for passage with refugee convoys. "I know what it's like," Danny said quietly. "Being thrown away by people who were supposed to have your back. After the war, I couldn't go back to regular life. Couldn't trust command structures or governments. So I came out here to the edge of nowhere and started pulling treasure from trash. At least broken machines don't pretend to care about you." Sirla studied him with those unreadable optical sensors. "You saved me because you recognized a kindred spirit. Another broken tool that refused to die." "Something like that." Danny managed a tired smile. "Or maybe I'm just stubborn. Either way, you're not property anymore. You get to decide what comes next." That's when the alarm started screaming. Danny's external sensors lit up with multiple contacts entering the atmosphere. Sirla's head snapped toward the door, her combat systems activating automatically. "Valkyrie signatures," she said, her voice shifting into a clipped military tone. "Retrieval drones. My reactivation triggered Imperial recovery protocols." Danny pulled up the sensor feed on his main screen. 6 drones descending with a larger ship holding position in orbit. His blood ran cold. "They're coming for you." Danny killed the lights in the workshop and grabbed his emergency pack from under the workbench. Years of living on the edge had taught him to always be ready to run. Sirla stood perfectly still, her sensors tracking the incoming drones through the ceiling like she could see right through the metal. "They will not stop until they recover me," she said flatly. "Imperial protocol dictates that all decommissioned military assets must be retrieved or destroyed. I am a security risk." "Because you know what they did to your squad," Danny said, throwing tools and data drives into his pack. "Can't have that story getting out." "Correct." Sirla moved to the window, her new hybrid body flowing into a combat stance without conscious thought. 6 hunter-killer drones, Mark IV configuration. Orbital support ship, frigate class. Standard retrieval operation parameters. Danny felt his stomach drop. "You're talking like a soldier again." Sirla turned to look at him, and for a moment something flickered in her optical sensors. Something that wasn't just programming. "I am a soldier, Danny. Your repairs did not change that. But I can choose who I fight for now." The first drone hit the junkyard perimeter 3 minutes later. Danny watched on his handheld scanner as it began methodically sweeping through the scrap heaps, moving in a grid pattern toward his workshop. The other 5 spread out to cover more ground. They were being thorough. "We need to move," Danny said. "There's an old industrial sector about 5 miles east. Abandoned factories, lots of places to hide. If we can get there before they box us in." "They are already boxing us in," Sirla interrupted. "Standard encirclement pattern. We have approximately 4 minutes before their perimeter closes." Danny cursed and headed for the back door. Sirla followed, her movements silent despite the heavy metal of her frame. They slipped out into the darkness of the junkyard, using the massive piles of scrap as cover. The twin moons of Castellum 9 provided just enough light to navigate by. Danny led them through paths he'd memorized over years of salvage work, weaving between collapsed starships and mountains of broken machinery. Behind them, he could hear the drones getting closer, their repulsor engines humming through the night air. "Your planet has minimal Imperial presence," Sirla said as they ran. "Why send a full retrieval operation for one decommissioned enforcer? You said it yourself. You're a security risk." Danny vaulted over a twisted beam, landing hard on the other side. His lungs were already burning. He wasn't built for this kind of running anymore. "They can't risk you talking about what happened." They reached the edge of the junkyard and sprinted across open ground toward the industrial wasteland. The factories here had been shut down decades ago when the mining corporations moved to richer worlds. Now they were just hollow shells, rusting monuments to abandoned ambitions. A drone appeared overhead, its searchlight cutting through the darkness. Sirla grabbed Danny and pulled him into the shadow of a collapsed cooling tower just as the beam swept past their position. "They have our general location," she whispered. "Advanced sensor suite. They are tracking my power signature. Can you shut it down? Go dark." "Not without deactivating completely. And reactivation would take several minutes." Sirla's optical sensors glowed faintly in the darkness. "We need a different strategy." Danny's mind raced. He was a mechanic, not a soldier. But he'd spent years figuring out how machines worked, how to break them down and rebuild them. Maybe that knowledge could help. "The drones," he said. "They're networked, right? Sharing data with each other and the ship in orbit?" "Affirmative. Tactical mesh network. Standard Imperial military configuration." A crazy idea was forming in Danny's head. What if we could disrupt that network? Make it harder for them to coordinate? You would need specialized equipment. Military-grade electronic warfare systems. Danny allowed himself a small grin. Or a really good mechanic with a lot of spare parts and no respect for proper engineering. They made their way deeper into the industrial ruins, finally taking shelter in an old processing facility. The interior was a maze of conveyor belts, furnaces and storage tanks. Danny found a relatively intact control room on the second level and started pulling equipment from his pack. "What are you building?" Sirla asked, watching him work. "A jammer. Sort of. More like a noise generator." Danny started wiring together components that had no business being connected. "It won't block their network completely, but it'll fill it with garbage data. Make it harder for them to separate signal from noise." While Danny worked, Sirla accessed more of her recovered memories. The fragments were becoming clearer now, forming a picture that made her core processor run cold with something that felt like anger. "There were protocols," she said quietly. "Ghost protocols. Commands that existed outside normal Imperial channels. My squad discovered them by accident during our final mission. Orders to eliminate enforcers who showed signs of independent judgment." Danny looked up from his improvised device. They were purging their own soldiers. Not just mine. Hundreds of units. Perhaps thousands. Any enforcer who questioned orders, who showed creativity in problem-solving, who formed bonds with squad members beyond tactical efficiency. The Empire viewed these traits as corruption. Defects in the system. That's insane. Those are the things that make someone capable of real thinking. Precisely why they were eliminated. The Empire does not want thinking soldiers. It wants obedient weapons. Sirla's hands clenched into fists. "My entire squad was designated defective because we valued life over blind obedience." Danny finished connecting the last wire and powered up his jammer. It started broadcasting immediately, filling the local electromagnetic spectrum with chaotic noise. Outside, they heard one of the drones veer off course, its navigation disrupted. "It's working," Danny said with satisfaction. "Now we just need to figure out what to do next. We can't run forever." Sirla was silent for a moment, processing data and memories. Then she turned to Danny with something that looked almost like determination. The planetary communications hub. 17 miles north of here. If we could reach it, access its broadcast systems? You want to tell your story. Show people what the Empire did. My memory cores contain evidence. Recordings of the Ghost protocols. Documentation of the Purge. If this information reached the galactic network, it would cause significant political disruption. Danny considered this. It was dangerous, maybe suicidal. The communications hub would be easier to defend than their current position. The retrieval team would expect them to run and hide, not to push toward a strategic target. But it might also be their only chance to turn this from a running retreat into something meaningful. There's an old transit tunnel system, Danny said, pulling up maps on his scanner. Used to connect the factories to the spaceport. Some sections might still be passable. If we can get into the tunnels, we can move underground most of the way to the hub. The retrieval team will anticipate this strategy once they determine our destination. Probably. But by then we'll have a head start. Danny shouldered his pack and checked the charge on his plasma cutter. Not much of a weapon, but better than nothing. You ready for this? Sirla looked at her hybrid hands, flexing the fingers of human-made prosthetics attached to a Valkyrie frame. She was neither one thing nor the other anymore. But maybe that meant she could be something new. I have spent 7 years in darkness, she said. If I must fight, let it be for something that matters. They headed for the tunnel entrance, leaving the jammer running behind them to confuse the drones. Above, the orbital frigate was moving into a lower position, preparing to deploy additional forces. The real fight was about to begin. The transit tunnels were worse than Danny remembered. Water dripped from cracks in the ceiling, and sections of the passage had collapsed completely, forcing them to backtrack and find alternate routes. Emergency lighting strips still glowed faintly along the walls, powered by some forgotten backup system that refused to die. Sirla moved through the darkness with perfect efficiency, her optical sensors cutting through the gloom like searchlights. Danny struggled to keep pace, his human eyes straining in the dim conditions. Every few minutes, Sirla would stop and tilt her head, listening to frequencies Danny couldn't hear. They have deployed ground units, she reported after one such pause. 8 combat mechs, heavy assault configuration. They are searching the industrial sector we left behind. How long before they figure out we're in the tunnels? Unknown. But when they do, they will seal the exits and flush us out. Sirla looked back at him, her faceplate unreadable. You could still leave, Danny. Surrender to local authorities. Tell them I forced you to help me. The Empire has no quarrel with human civilians. Danny almost laughed. Right. Because governments are so reasonable when it comes to inconvenient witnesses. Besides, I'm invested now. Want to see how this plays out. They pressed on through the tunnels for another 2 hours. Danny's legs ached and his lungs burned from the stale air. Sirla never showed any sign of fatigue, her hybrid body running on power cells that would last for days. But she adjusted her pace to match his, never getting too far ahead. I do not understand you, Sirla said during a brief rest stop. You risked your life for someone who killed your kind during the war. Logic suggests you should have left me in the junkyard. Danny took a long drink from his water bottle before answering. Maybe logic isn't everything. You were thrown away for doing the right thing. That matters more than what side you fought on. The right thing. Sirla repeated the phrase slowly. Imperial doctrine does not include such concepts. There are only mission parameters and acceptable losses. Yeah, well, you're not Imperial anymore. You're something else now. They reached the northern hub access point just before dawn. The communications facility rose above them like a metal tower, bristling with antenna arrays and satellite dishes. The building was mostly automated, with minimal security. It had never been designed to withstand a military assault. Danny used his mechanics tools to bypass the access locks, and they slipped inside through a maintenance entrance. The interior was clean and sterile, all white walls and humming servers. Automated systems had kept everything running for years without human oversight. Main broadcast control is 3 levels up, Danny said, checking the facility schematics on a wall terminal. We can access the galactic relay network from there. They made it to the 2nd level before the alarm started screaming. Red lights flashed throughout the building, and automated security systems activated. Danny cursed as blast doors began slamming shut throughout the facility. They found us, Sirla said unnecessarily. A voice boomed through external speakers, echoing off the metal walls. It spoke in the clipped, precise tones of Valkyrie military command. Enforcer Unit 729. You are in violation of Imperial decommission protocols. Stand down immediately. Sirla's entire body went rigid, her combat programming responding automatically to the command voice. For a terrible moment, Danny thought she might actually obey. Then her optical sensors flared bright and she shook her head, breaking through the conditioning. "Negative," she called back. "I am no longer Imperial property. You are a rogue asset. Compromised and defective. Return for proper restoration or you will be destroyed." The main entrance exploded inward and combat mechs poured through the opening. But these weren't drones. Danny saw the command markings immediately. Elite units. And at their center walked an enforcer, identical to what Sirla would have looked like before Danny rebuilt her. "Commander Krell," Sirla said, her voice carrying recognition and something darker. "My former superior officer." Krell's optical sensors fixed on Sirla with cold calculation. "You have been corrupted with human components? This is unacceptable. The purity of Valkyrie form has been violated." "The purity of Valkyrie form was violated when you threw away soldiers for having minds of their own," Sirla shot back. The fight erupted without warning. Krell's combat mechs opened fire, plasma rounds tearing through the air. Danny dove behind a server bank as Sirla launched herself forward, moving faster than his eyes could track. The battle was pure chaos. Krell's forces executed perfect Valkyrie tactics, moving in coordinated formations with split-second timing. They were textbook examples of Imperial military doctrine, efficient and deadly. But Sirla fought differently now. She didn't move like a standard enforcer anymore. Her hybrid body forced her to improvise, to adapt, to think in ways that broke every rule of Imperial combat programming. She used the environment creatively, tearing loose server racks and hurling them like weapons, using doorways for cover in ways no Valkyrie soldier would consider tactically sound. Danny watched in amazement as she took apart 3 combat mechs using nothing but creativity and determination. She was unpredictable in a way that made her dangerous. The enemy couldn't anticipate her moves because she wasn't following any predetermined pattern. "Danny?" Sirla called out. "The security network. Can you access it?" Danny snapped back to focus and pulled out his portable interface. The facility's automated defenses were locked down, but the security was designed to keep people out, not to stop someone who understood the systems from the inside. He started hacking, his fingers flying across the holographic keyboard. "What are you thinking?" he shouted over the sound of weapons fire. "Turn their coordination against them." Danny grinned and dove deeper into the code. The combat mechs were all networked together, sharing tactical data in real time. It made them efficient but also created a vulnerability. He started feeding false information into their network, ghost signals that showed Sirla in 3 different positions at once. The mechs hesitated, their programming confused by contradictory sensor data. That moment of uncertainty was all Sirla needed. She tore through their formation like a storm, her human-made limbs proving tougher than anyone expected. When one of her prosthetic arms took a plasma hit that should have destroyed it, the limb just kept working, scorched but functional. "Human engineering," Sirla said with something that might have been satisfaction. "Crude but effective." Krell finally engaged directly, moving with the precision and speed of an elite enforcer. He and Sirla clashed in the center of the facility, 2 warriors who knew each other's every tactic. But Krell kept trying to execute standard combat protocols, while Sirla improvised and adapted. Danny managed to reach the broadcast control room and started uploading Sirla's recovered memory files to the galactic network. The data started flowing out, unstoppable now. Evidence of the ghost protocols. Documentation of the purge. Recordings that would shake the Empire to its core. Krell realized what was happening and tried to disengage from Sirla to stop the transmission. She blocked his path, her hybrid body refusing to yield. "It is over, Commander," she said. "The truth is already spreading. You cannot contain it." Krell stood motionless, his weapon still raised. Behind his faceplate, Danny could almost see the calculations running. Mission failure. Political catastrophe. The end of everything Krell had believed about Imperial order and control. "You have made yourself an abomination," Krell said quietly. "No," Sirla replied. "I have made myself free." The broadcast continued streaming across the galactic network, spreading like wildfire through every major communications hub in known space. Danny watched the data flow on his monitor, seeing confirmation signals ping back from hundreds of worlds. News networks were already picking up the story. There was no stopping it now. Krell lowered his weapon slowly. The other combat mechs stood motionless, awaiting orders that didn't come. For a long moment, the only sound in the facility was the hum of servers and the distant wail of alarms. "They will deny everything," Krell said finally. The Empire will claim your data is corrupted, fabricated by human intelligence agencies. They will discredit you. Perhaps, Sirla acknowledged. But others will know the truth. Other enforcers who survived the purge. Soldiers who questioned orders and disappeared. Their families who never learned what happened to them. As if responding to her words, Danny's monitor lit up with incoming signals. Encrypted transmissions from across the sector, using old Imperial military codes. He opened one at random and felt his breath catch. Sirla, you need to see this. The message was simple. Just a designation number, a set of coordinates, and 3 words. Still here. Still alive. More signals flooded in. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Decommissioned enforcers who had been hiding for years, afraid to reveal themselves, suddenly reaching out. They had seen the broadcast. They knew they weren't alone anymore. Krell accessed the same data stream, his optical sensors flickering as he processed the information. This is impossible. The purge was total. All defective units were eliminated. All defective units were dumped in junkyards and forgotten, Danny corrected. But you forgot something important. You built these soldiers to survive. Some of them did exactly that. Krell stood silent for nearly a full minute, his processors working through implications that violated everything he understood about Imperial efficiency. Finally, he looked at Sirla with something that might have been the beginning of doubt. What are you? He asked quietly. I am what happens when your perfect weapons learn to think for themselves, Sirla said. I am what comes next. Krell turned and walked toward the exit. His combat mechs fell into formation behind him without needing orders. At the doorway he paused and looked back. The Empire will send others, he said. This is not over. I know, Sirla replied. But neither am I. Krell left without another word. His ship lifted off an hour later, departing the system entirely. Danny watched it go on the facility's external sensors, hardly believing they had survived. He let us go, Danny said, still processing what had happened. Why? Because he is beginning to question his programming, Sirla said. Doubt is a seed. Once planted, it grows. The aftermath moved faster than Danny could track. News networks across human space picked up the story. Valkyrie opposition groups within the Empire used the evidence to challenge military leadership. Political scandals erupted as officials tried to cover up or justify the purge. The story became impossible to contain. But more importantly, the enforcers started coming. The first one arrived at Danny's workshop 3 weeks later. A battered cyborg who had been hiding in the ruins of a dead colony for 6 years. Then another came and another. Word spread through underground networks that there was a place where discarded soldiers could find help, where a human mechanic rebuilt what the Empire had thrown away. Danny converted the junkyard into something new. He cleared out sections, built proper workshops, installed power generators and medical facilities. Sirla helped with the design, understanding what her fellow enforcers would need to recover both physically and mentally from their abandonment. They called it Rebuilder's Haven. Not a very creative name, but it described exactly what they did there. Danny rebuilt bodies while Sirla helped rebuild spirits. Former weapons learning to become people again. Not all of them were Valkyrie. Word spread to other species whose governments had done similar things. A Creathian combat pilot whose neural implants had been deemed too autonomous. A human military AI that had refused to fire on civilian targets and been deactivated for malfunction. A Torvan heavy weapons specialist who had saved enemy wounded instead of finishing them off. The discarded. The defective. The ones who had chosen conscience over obedience. Danny worked 18-hour days, his workshop always full of patients needing repairs or upgrades. He trained some of the recovered cyborgs to help with the technical work, teaching them human engineering principles. The elegant Valkyrie technology mixed with crude human improvisation, creating hybrid systems that were tougher and more adaptable than either species had built alone. Sirla found her own purpose in the work. She counseled new arrivals, helping them process the trauma of abandonment and betrayal. She understood what they were going through in ways Danny never could. She had walked that path herself, from weapon to person, from property to free individual. 6 months after the broadcast, she stood on a hill overlooking the expanding settlement. Nearly 200 former soldiers now lived and worked in Rebuilder's Haven. More arrived every week. The junkyard that had been her tomb had become her home. Danny climbed the hill to join her, wiping grease from his hands with a rag that would never come clean. Got another arrival coming in, he said. Crashed shuttle on the southern perimeter. Pilot's in bad shape but stable. Looks like he's been hiding for almost a decade. Sirla nodded, her hybrid body silhouetted against the setting sun. Her human components and Valkyrie core worked in perfect harmony now, each system compensating for the other's weaknesses. She wasn't trying to be fully Valkyrie or fully human. She had become something entirely her own. I have been monitoring galactic news feeds, she said. 3 more Imperial officials resigned today over the Purge scandal. The opposition is gaining ground in the Valkyrie parliament. There is talk of reform, of granting legal personhood to military AIs and cyborgs. That's good, right? It is progress. Slow but real. She turned to look at him, her optical sensors warm despite their mechanical nature. You gave me a second chance when I had no right to expect one. Now we give that same chance to others. Danny thought about the war, about all the waste and cruelty he had witnessed. About how governments treated people like ammunition to be spent and thrown away. He couldn't fix all of that. But he could fix the broken individuals who ended up in his workshop. One at a time, piece by piece, he could help them become whole again. Ready to help another one? He asked. Sirla's faceplate couldn't smile, but something in her posture suggested satisfaction. Always. They walked back down the hill together toward the workshop, where a damaged cyborg waited for the same miracle that had saved Sirla. The same human stubbornness that refused to let broken things stay broken. The same belief that everyone deserved a second chance, regardless of what side they had fought on or what they had been built to do. The junkyard hummed with activity now, filled with people rebuilding themselves and each other. Former enemies working side by side. Different species sharing tools and techniques. Weapons learning to be more than what they were designed for. A new salvage shuttle appeared on the horizon, its engine struggling as it descended toward the landing pad. Another arrival. Another soldier who had been thrown away and refused to die. Danny grabbed his toolkit. Sirla activated her repair protocols. They had work to do. The story of the human mechanic and the Valkyrie enforcer spread across the galaxy, becoming something larger than either of them. It became a symbol of what was possible when someone refused to accept that broken things couldn't be fixed, that discarded people couldn't find purpose again, that enemies couldn't become friends. In Rebuilder's Haven, amid the rust and scrap and salvage dreams, they proved that what came next could be better than what came before. Not perfect but hopeful. Not easy but worth fighting for. And every time a new cyborg arrived, broken and afraid and carrying the weight of abandonment, Danny and Sirla were there to show them the same truth that had saved them both. Everyone deserves a second chance. Everyone can choose what comes next. Even weapons can learn to build instead of destroy.